1914, John D. Rockefeller was outside of his church in New York, smiling as he handed shiny new dimes to children, a quiet gesture of generosity. At the same time, nearly 2,000 miles away, tents filled with striking coal miners and their families were set ablaze by the Colorado National Guard in an attempt to break up the strike. 24 people died, most of them women and children. The mine was owned by the Rockefellers. The headlines were brutal. Overnight, the name Rockefeller became shorthand for everything broken in American capitalism, and in that moment, under public pressure and moral crisis, the richest family in America pivoted. The man who helped build the most powerful monopoly in history would now try to save the system he nearly destroyed.
Sounds like a pretty pivotal moment.
Oh, very pivotal.
All right, welcome to 55 Folks. I'm Brian. Sam unfortunately couldn't be in studio this episode. We got him on audio call here. Where are you off at?
Well, as you know, I coach the local football team in the area, and our star linebacker, Gary, got in a very serious car accident, and we have a state championship coming up here just next week, and unfortunately, if you'll have to excuse my somber tone for probably the remainder of the episode because of the tragic car accident after the big division win last Friday night. But I think almost for sure we'll be able to use this for motivation, and for forever in the future, people will probably look back on this team and remember us and remember us well.
Gosh, there's billions of folks to choose from here. I think there's something like 100 billion people have ever existed. Why did you pick Rockefeller?
I was tired of picking folks. I wanted a feller. So that's mainly why. Also, he, at one point in time, was worth 1.5% of the United States GDP.
I heard he was richer than Musk and Bezos combined.
The other thing, too, is while he started getting into the philanthropy, he pretty much reinvented public education and modern medicine, too. So, and at one point, he owned 90% of the United States oil industry.
And that's when they said, can't be doing that.
That's when they said, I don't know.
Broke him up.
I don't know if it's good to have. Yeah, well, then they broke him up, and then he became even more rich because he still owned shares in the
broken up pieces.
Yeah, they became like Chevron and Exxon and all these different oil companies, but he still owned pieces in them. So then when they got broken up into smaller pieces and then they started to go up in value, he went up even more than he was. So kind of famously owned or had shares in like the railroads that delivered the oil. I mean, every step of the mines, the distribution.
The old vertical monopoly.
And then that became Standard Oil.
It's a great name.
Yeah, it's an awesome name.
Just what else could you need?
Yeah.
Just standard.
Standard Oil.
We do oil, and it's no frills.
No frills, yeah. But he could run people out of business because he controlled everything, so he could like underprice and basically drive everyone out of business. So.
And he did? I assume.
Basically did, yeah. His dad was like this con man, and I think at a young age he decided, like, he saw what his dad was doing and it wasn't working real well. He got basically obsessed with like control, and every dime, every penny is accounted for.
Snake oil salesman? What was he dealing?
I don't really know what he was doing, but
from snake oil to real oil.
There's a time when John D. Rockefeller was hated more than any man alive. He was accused of strangling American business, bribing officials, and draining the nation's moral lifeblood. In our dream, we have limitless resources, and the people yield themselves with perfect docility to our molding hand. The present educational conventions fade from their minds, and unhampered by tradition, we work our own goodwill upon a grateful and responsive rural folk. We shall not try to make these people or any of their children into philosophers or men of learning or men of science. We have not to raise up from among them authors, editors, poets, or men of letters. We shall not search for embryo great artists, painters, musicians, nor lawyers, doctors, preachers, politicians, statesmen, of whom we have an ample supply. The task we set before ourselves is very simple as well as a very beautiful one, to train these people as we find them to a perfectly ideal life just where they are. So we will organize our children into a little community and teach them to do in a perfect way the things their fathers and mothers are doing in an imperfect way, in the homes, in the shops, and on the farm. Yeah, I mean, I think probably the most interesting thing about him, because there were plenty of extremely rich people back in the day, Carnegie and Rockefeller and J.P. Morgan. There was a lot of different of these kind of robber baron types. But after kind of the public sentiment started turning against him, which part of it is he was extremely rich. So there's part of that for sure. But the other part was, like we were talking about, that Ludlow massacre turned the tide against him too. He started reshaping his public image by giving back. And so now he's often, to some degree, and Carnegie too, a lot of these guys are like known as philanthropists. But if you look at, he invested pretty heavily in medicine and medical schools. And there were, I mean, no doubt improvements that occurred with that. But also it was a little bit of a self-centered motive, because he realized that the oil and the petrochemicals that they use in a lot of these medicines, I mean, it would behoove him for people to start pushing that. He realized if we can get ahead of this and start using, and now I looked it up, like 99% of all pharmaceuticals or any sort of drug is going to contain some sort of petrochemical in it, which would have, obviously an oil byproduct. So, yeah. And the other thing he invested real heavily in was public schooling. And it was similar to the medical schools, where the standards weren't there. It was still, to some degree, like, kids will walk to their local one-room schoolhouse, and Susie, who's Joe's wife who farms, is going to go teach the neighborhood kids. What he had said about it was, we're going to make a system that promotes like good workers, basically. Okay. Not like creative free thinkers, or quoted as saying, I don't want a nation of thinkers, I want a nation of workers.
Aim to create a workforce that would be docile and subservient to the economic machine. Yeah, I get all that, but like, I wonder how exactly he did that, if that's the conclusion, just with curriculum or whatever he's tried to standardize.
Yeah, I don't know. You could probably argue about it, because I'm sure it's a good thing to fund public education.
Yeah, alternative to whatever, no education.
Yeah.
No. That is quite the quote.
So this is their, I don't know, it's hard to look back and like read motive into them, because they don't, it's hard to read motive into anyone. Sometimes make assumptions about it and be fairly accurate, if that makes sense. So, it may have been a good thing for these rural people with no education. Like, it's good to have a literate populace, but...
Yeah, I don't know. To most degree, doing is better than thinking, just...
Yeah.
As far as happiness or whatever. So, like, who's to say? I don't know. I mean, it sounds like... Yeah, I just want an army of workers and no free thinkers allowed. But yeah, like you said, it's hard to tell the specific context or motives today.
It was a different time too, like the way they wrote and spoke about things. Like they probably wouldn't I wouldn't think if we were doing something like that today, we would write it.
We don't want thinkers.
Yeah, you wouldn't write it that way. But back then they maybe weren't quite as...
That could have had a different connotation or whatever.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you never know. I mean, all we can do is present what they said, and people can read into it what they will. But, I mean, it doesn't sound very good when you read about them, molding them with their hand, and we hope they're docile about it and this and that. But
okay, this is a new segment I want to test out. It's called Did He Drown? In this case, I'll ask you since you know about him. Did he drown?
No.
He didn't?
No.
How, do you know how he passed away?
Died in his sleep from sclerotic myocarditis. That's the way to go at 97 of sclerotic myocarditis.
Okay, so he didn't drown.
No, didn't drown.
We'll see how that segment goes. We could just start, making a third of the episode someone who did drown, just like seeking that out.
Yeah.
So then,
yes.
So then the answer is yes, quite a few times. Yes, actually, he did drown.
Do somebody on the Titanic at one point.
Oh yeah.
I'd like to start this episode with our recurring segment of Did He Drown?
It could be its own channel. Did they drown? And then everyone drowned. It's just it's people who all drowned. Believe it or not, yes.
Yes.
He did. Or one, then you change it up once. Like the whole story is something about a boat. Or, like you think the boat's going to sink. So you're certain the guy drowned the whole time. Because the 100 people before this have drowned on this channel.
He was impaled by Aztecs when he landed.
Did he drown? No, believe it or not, no. He survived for 2 years at sea. Yeah. Was rescued. Or that's what it could be.
He died he actually died on the boat of scurvy.
Yeah, it could just be a mix of successful and failed like survival stories or whatever,
Yeah.
So half of the stories are guys who survived. No big, you didn't write a big closing paragraph?
I'm sure I have one. Let me find it.
I don't know if we need to keep ending them that way or not. I think it's a fine line. Like you don't want to like over dramatize stuff, so whatever.
John D. Rockefeller didn't just build a company. He built a system, one that outlived him, evolved beyond him, and still shapes the way we live, work, and give. His life was a contradiction, brutal and benevolent, methodical and mysterious. He mastered the art of taking and redefined what it meant to give. But in the end, his legacy isn't found in the oil fields or the foundations. It's in the question he never fully answered. Can one man wield that much power and still be good? That question echoes louder than ever, and perhaps in chasing his answer, we're really chasing our own.
Quite philosophical.
Yeah. I was in a philosophical mood when I wrote it.
Yeah, that was a great piece of writing. I guess we're not smart enough to say whether he was good or not. It's quite a subjective.
Yeah, I don't think any
blanket statement.
Really, only God knows. We can't. Ultimately, we're not wise enough to tell you about his character. Only the good Lord can tell you what was written on the man's heart. But we can tell you what he did.
I don't really know what to make of the end.